This movie is about a husband and wife who head to an island called Rarotonga for vacation, and also to build a new resort there. While the wife is on her way to another island, the boat she's on suddenly stops moving because of a huge storm. Luckily, one of the crew members helps her out. In the end, the two of them end up stranded on a completely remote island and have to survive in the wild while waiting for the Coast Guard to find them. The story takes place on an island called Rarotonga. It's about a couple named John and Julia who travel there both for fun and to invest in building a new resort. After arriving at the airport, John and Julia are greeted by the hotel manager, William. William is supposed to partner with Julia on the resort project, but this project has caught a lot of attention from the locals because they're worried it'll destroy the island's natural environment. Meanwhile, local media keeps blowing the issue way out of proportion and fueling the concerns. When John and Julia get to the hotel, they meet a beautiful and super friendly receptionist named Anita. Still, throughout the trip, Julia is super focused on work and business stuff and acts kinda cold and distant toward her husband, who just wants them to enjoy the vacation together. The next morning, Julia calls her dad, Trevor. Trevor is a hugely successful plastics businessman back in the States. Honestly, he's never been happy about Julia marrying John. He thinks John is just mooching off her money and never lifts a finger to help with the family business. After hanging up with her dad, Julia heads to the dock to check out a small island that's supposed to be the site for the resort. At first, she thinks she's boarding a big ship, but William introduces her to the captain, Robbie, and one of the crew, Sid. On the way, Sid suddenly gets a severe storm warning, but Robbie completely brushes it off and says the storm won't stop them. Meanwhile, back at the hotel, two cops named Roy and Brooke show up looking for someone named Sid, who's wanted for murder. But Anita tells them she's never seen anyone by that name. After work, Anita runs into John, who's wandering around the hotel. John wants to buy a gift for his wife, but since he doesn't really know the island or what's available, he asks Anita to help him find something special. Anita says, "I think I've got just the perfect thing in mind. It's really amazing." Before they go shopping, Anita takes John around to see some of the island's natural spots and beautiful sights. Then she brings him to a jewelry store to buy him a black pearl necklace. Black pearls are one of the special symbols of their country. At the same time, elsewhere, Robbie notices Julia is seasick and tells her to go rest in the cabin. Suddenly, the sky turns dark and stormy, and at the same time, a weather report comes on TV warning about a major storm and heavy rain hitting the whole island chain. Julia, still feeling seasick, suddenly comes face to face with Sid, who immediately tells her they need to get off the boat right now. It quickly becomes clear that all the cabin doors have been locked by Robbie, but thankfully, Sid manages to find a way out through a window, and he convinces Julia to jump into the sea with him. The next scene jumps to the following day. Julia wakes up on a completely unknown, deserted island, one that's never had any humans living on it. She's totally freaked out and starts yelling for the captain. After a few moments, she looks around in panic, then spots Sid and calms down a little. Still terrified and confused, Julia asks Sid where the boat and the captain are, but Sid doesn't react to any of her questions. At first, she thinks he's mute, but really he's just thinking hard about how they're going to survive. They need shelter, water, and food. Like he said earlier, Sid heads into the jungle to gather stuff to build a basic shelter. Julia, scared out of her mind, keeps sticking close to him and anxiously says building a shelter is pointless because she's sure the rescue teams will find them any minute now. Julia, totally overwhelmed and confused, decides to sit by the beach and quietly watch Sid work. But as night approaches, she moves closer to him again and reluctantly accepts that she's about to spend her first night ever on this remote, unknown island. Meanwhile, somewhere else, John finds out from William about the terrible accident that happened to Julia and Robbie's boat. He immediately rushes to the Coast Guard office and gets the full rundown from an officer named Tony. Tony reassures him that they will never stop searching for Julia. When John gets back to the hotel, he quickly calls Trevor to tell him everything. Trevor wastes no time and decides right away to make plans to fly to Rarotonga. On the other side, Julia keeps running into scary situations. For someone who grew up in a wealthy family, this is her very first time dealing with raw wilderness and no modern conveniences. The next morning, when Julia wakes up, she sees Sid getting ready to head into the jungle. He explains that he wants to climb to a higher point so he can get a better look around the island and maybe figure out exactly where in the world they've washed up. Along the way, Julia keeps complaining about being hungry until Sid finally gives her some sugarcane to chew on while they keep moving. Elsewhere, John and Anita are hoping the Coast Guard can find Sid and Julia. At that moment, Anita reveals that Sid is actually her brother-in-law. When they reach a fairly high spot, Sid manages to survey the island, but he still can't figure out exactly where they are. In the end, he decides to head back to the shelter with Julia. On the way back, Sid accidentally hears the sound of running water, and they manage to find a source of fresh drinking water. Since Julia hasn't showered since the day before, she takes the chance to jump in and swim, but Sid tells her to hurry up and get out because they need to make it back to the shelter before dark. On the way back, Julia suddenly slips and hurts her foot. Sid goes looking for medicinal plants to help, and he has to carry Julia on his back, or at least struggle to help her limp, all the way back to the shelter. At the same time, in another place, William and John hold a meeting with the local people to talk about their construction project. But one of the locals, a guy named Benny, strongly opposes it, saying he doesn't believe the project can happen without harming the environment. To counter Benny's points, William talks about economic growth and the financial benefits of the project, and that convinces a few people in the crowd to switch sides and support them. In the end, John asks everyone not to worry and promises that he and William will do everything they can to make sure the island's nature is not only preserved, but stays healthy for future generations. The next morning, Anita goes to John to tell him that the Coast Guard has found the boat's captain alive. The news is also playing on TV. The report says Robbie was thrown off the deck during the storm and has no idea what happened to Julia or where she is now. Julia, not knowing what else to do, decides to use coconuts to spell out a giant SOS on the beach. But Sid tells her it's pointless. She's hoping a plane or helicopter will spot the signal from the air, but she has no clue that this area doesn't have any aircraft flying overhead. Not planes, not helicopters. About an hour later, the SOS gets completely washed away by the waves, and Julia gets super angry and frustrated. She feels totally helpless and like she can't do anything right. Sid tries to calm her down, treats her sunburned skin, and while he's doing that, he starts telling her about his wife who passed away not long ago. When Sid sees that Julia is totally losing hope, he tells her he's got an idea to get them back to Rarotonga, building a homemade boat or a raft. He starts teaching her how to tie bamboo together, hoping the thing they build will actually get them off the island and save their lives. Meanwhile, the movie cuts for a second to the airport, where Trevor storms onto Rarotonga, clearly pissed off. Back on the island, Sid and Julia decide to test the raft they made. While Sid dives near the shore to check something, he accidentally finds a shell with a black pearl inside. That night, Julia opens up and admits she's spent her whole life buried in work and never made time for her personal life. Right then, Sid gives her the black pearl he found as a gift. Out of nowhere, Julia asks him to teach her how to dance. Before they even realize it, all those days of surviving together and being stuck side by side have made them incredibly close. The next day, Anita accidentally spots John and Robbie talking privately, and she sees John handing Robbie a big stack of cash. Anita gets suspicious and thinks John paid Robbie to hurt Julia. But John later explains that it was just compensation money so Robbie could buy a new boat. Because the test went well the day before, Sid and Julia decide it's time to leave the island. But suddenly, a shark shows up right in front of them. Sid immediately tells Julia to swim back to shore while he tries to scare the shark away. Luckily, Sid makes it out okay, even though his leg gets pretty badly cut. While Sid is out fishing, Julia suddenly spots a floating box drifting toward them. Sid grabs it fast and they find survival gear inside, stuff like a flare gun and a satellite phone. Julia uses the satellite phone to call John and tell him they're alive, begging him to send help ASAP. But John is too busy partying with Anita at that moment and doesn't listen to her voicemail until hours later. A while later, Julia suddenly sees a boat nearby. She yells at Sid to fire the flare gun to signal them. Turns out the boat has Robbie and his crew on it. They spot Sid and Julia, and Robbie heads toward the shore to pick them up. As soon as Robbie finds them, he immediately accuses Sid of being a wanted murderer and says Julia should have died back when he left her on the boat. Luckily, Sid gets a chance to fight back, and with Julia's help, she smacks Robbie over the head with a coconut, they manage to knock him out. After taking Robbie down, the two quickly get on the boat and force his crew to take them back. At the same time, Roy and Brooke show up at the Coast Guard office and happen to hear Sid's voice over the radio, saying he and Julia will be back soon. As soon as they reach the dock, Sid hands Robbie's crew over to the police. But to everyone's shock, Roy arrests Sid too, charging him with murder. It turns out Sid used to be a doctor who was accused of causing his wife's death due to a medical mistake. The next day, Julia asks her dad to post bail for Sid. Deep down, she can't believe Sid is really a killer. After all, he was the one who took care of her and saved her life the whole time they were stranded. Around the same time, when William tries to talk business, Benny suddenly cuts him off and shows evidence that the project could seriously harm the environment. Benny lays out all the potential problems, and it convinces Julia to change the whole plan so it's more eco-friendly. Meanwhile, Anita is at a bar and happens to catch John shamelessly stealing a bottle of wine. John realizes Anita has been watching him, so he drags her into a room and slaps her because she's seen too much of his shady behavior. When John thinks Anita is unconscious, he locks her in a closet and pours poison into the bottle of wine he plans to give to Julia. But Anita was only pretending to be out cold. She immediately runs to Sid and tells him everything, John's plan to poison Julia and all the dirty stuff he's been up to. Following his plan, John goes to Julia and her dad, pours her a glass of wine right away. At that exact moment, Sid bursts in and stops her from drinking it. Unfortunately, Julia doesn't believe Sid. She still thinks he's a murderer, so they throw him out. Later, Anita explains to Julia and Trevor how she couldn't handle her sister's serious illness and had to come to terms with her death. Hearing the truth makes Trevor tell John to drink the wine he poured for Julia himself. When John refuses, Julia finally realizes what a dangerous and evil guy her husband really is. After the truth comes out, Julia is heartbroken that she married the wrong man. It makes her see who really cared about her and put his life on the line for her. So the next day, Julia goes to Sid to start a new life together with him.